to another episode in the Search Ads 360 on Air series. I'm Francis Horton. I'm a technical specialist here on the Search Ads 360 team here in London. And I'm going to be taking you through the site-wide tagging and conversion measurement solutions that are coming up Search Ads 360. I also have with me Sebastian in Dublin, who's going to introduce himself.
Hi everyone, I'm Sebastian. I sit in the Dublin office and I work on Search Ads 360, mostly on agencies. And I will guide you through parallel tracking later on in this session.
So the first thing to do is talk about the difference between first-party and third-party cookies. So as you might know, Safari are launching an update to their browser, which will mean that third-party cookies don't work as well as previously. And in order to have the best possible measurement, we need to move towards the use of first-party cookies. This will also allow you to place site tags across the whole site and allow you to be ready for any future changes as they come. There are various benefits to site-wide tagging. So like I mentioned, you'll be able to adapt to changes in the ecosystem as Safari and other browsers update. And any changes we make in the back end will dynamically update, so you won't need to re-implement the code. It will also allow for complete and full measurement, so complete accurate conversion tracking and no loss of conversion data. And it's also very easy to use. So with Google Tag Manager and all of our Google products, we're kind of merging them all into one global site tag so that you can place all the tags in one place. So there's two essential site-wide tagging solutions for Search Ads 360. First is the G-Tag, also known as the Global Site Tag, which is a reformatted version of the Floodlight tag, which you can place on all pages of the website. Which you'll place instead of the current Floodlight tags on the event snippet pages. And then there's the Google Tag Manager solution. So if you're already using Google Tag Manager, the container tag, you'll be able to quickly enable the conversion linker and then place your Floodlight tags within the Google Tag Manager templates. So here's a decision tree of what you should do, how you make your decisions on which of the solutions to use. So if you're only using offline conversions or Google Analytics as your main source of conversions, then you don't need to actually implement anything new because both of those use, well, the second one uses first-party cookies and the first one is served as an API integration. So that they're not affected by the upcoming changes. If not, and you're using Google Tag Manager, then you should implement the conversion linker with Google Tag Manager and implement the Floodlight tags via Google Tag Manager, because you already have Google Tag Manager on all pages of your site. And if you're not using either of those, then you should implement the new global site tag. So just running through the Google Tag Manager solution with the conversion linker. The first step is to enable the conversion linker in Google Tag Manager. Then you need to make sure that all Floodlight tags are firing through Google Tag Manager using the Floodlight template or by linking your Floodlight configuration to GTM from Campaign Manager. You also need to make sure that the SA360 conversion API is enabled because this will essentially act as auto tagging. So it will add the Google Click ID to all of your landing page URLs, which is the ID that we'll use to match back the conversion to the original click. So the steps to enable the conversion linker, it's really fast. It takes literally about 1 minute to set up. So you would go into Google Tag Manager, hit the new tag, and then you'll see a new tag type called conversion linker. Select that, and you then have to set up a trigger to fire the conversion linker on all pages. And that will essentially set the first-party cookie and capture the Google Click ID. And then the second part is to make sure that your Floodlight tags are also firing within GTM. And it's very important that you use the Floodlight template and not the custom HTML template, So if you just copy and paste the old iframe tags into the custom HTML template, it's not going to work. And therefore, you need to use the Floodlight templates that are provided. And now onto the implementation of the global site tag. So the global site tag comes in two parts. There's the global snippet, which is a new kind of extra bit of code that's part of the Floodlight tag that needs to be placed on all pages of the site, and that essentially sets the first-party cookie. The second part of the code, the event snippet, is essentially the reformatted version of your current Floodlight tag, and this code needs to go just on the conversion pages. So you'll need to replace your existing Floodlight tags with this updated version of the same tag called the event snippet. So in terms of the steps, the first thing to do is identify which of your tags you want to, are your main conversion sources, and stagger out how when you want to implement them, and just plan out which pages you want them to fire on and so on. Then you need to enable the conversion API in SA360, so to make sure that you're passing through the Google Click ID onto the landing page URL for all search engines. And then depending on the scenario, if you've already got a existing global snippet, maybe for your AdWords account, all you need to do is add the Google Marketing Platform Campaign Manager configuration ID, which I'll show you in a second, to all the existing global snippets. If there's no global snippet, then you just need to generate the global snippet and add it to all pages within the header. Then you need to remove the current Floodlight activity tags and replace them with their equivalent event snippet. Just remember, the event snippet is the reformatted version of the Floodlight tag. So if you don't remove the old Floodlight tag and you implement the event snippet, you'll see duplicate conversions. In order to generate the global tag via Campaign Manager, I would always do it via Campaign Manager, and you can do it in bulk. You can bulk select the tags that you want to update, and then just change the tag format from iframe tag to global site tag. And that will update the code, and then you can download the code from there. The code will consist, as I said, of two snippets, so that you'll have the global snippet, which needs to go on all pages of the website, and you can use the same snippet for all advertisers that share the same configuration. So if you've got 4 or 5 advertisers on search and maybe 2 or 3 on display that share the same configuration, you only need to put in that configuration ID once. And then you'll get the event snippet, which is the reformatted version of the Floodlight tag, and that should be placed on the individual conversion page. If you're using custom Floodlight variables, then you'll need to pass them through. So you just, as before, you will have extra lines for each of the variables, and you use the data layer or a variable from your site to populate them. You should populate them both in the script and no script versions of the tag, or sections of the tag. If you want to combine global site snippets, so maybe you have one for AdWords and one for Floodlight, or maybe you have multiple Floodlight configurations and you want to merge them into one, you can do that. So you'll see that the code for the global snippet on the Floodlight side is pretty much the same as the ads, the Google Ads snippet, with the difference being the configuration line. So if you want to merge them, all you need to do is take that configuration line and add it to one of the snippets. The only other thing that you'll notice that's different is the async section, which has, in this case, a double-click ID, and in the previous case, at the bottom, you'll see it has an AdWords ID. That doesn't matter. It's just to tell us where the code was generated, as long as you enter the configuration ID below in the lines at the bottom of the script. Once you've implemented the tags and you want to see if they're working, you would use the Google Tag Assistant. So it's a Chrome extension which you can download for free, and then you can perform a test transaction, And we've updated it so that you'll be able to see the global site tag that you see here on the left, fire in green. The event snippet will still come up as a floodlight tag. So when you hit the conversion page, you'll see a floodlight conversion. If you're using Google Tag Manager instead of the global site tag, then you'll see the Google Tag Manager tag firing. So as of last year, September the 21st, we started statistical modeling for all Safari conversions that couldn't be measured, and we're including them by default in SA360 reporting. So right now we're using modeling to estimate how many conversions you would have got, and we'll continue to do this going forward. But we expect the accuracy to become increasingly less accurate, and so we really urge you to implement one of these solutions rather than relying on the modeling. What happens is once you create the event snippet and implement it on the site, as soon as we start seeing conversions coming through, we'll stop the modeling for that particular tag. And the same for the Google Tag Manager linking solutions. In terms of reporting, you'll see a mismatch at the moment. So within search, within SA360 reports, we include the modeled conversions. And in Campaign Manager, in the paid search reports, you should see pretty much the same. So it'll include scaled conversions where we don't expect them to match 100% because of some rounding. And you'll also see the tracked conversions once you've implemented one of the solutions. However, all other reports in Campaign Manager do not show scaled conversions and do not show tracked Safari conversions. And the same goes for data transfer. So essentially, the only report in Campaign Manager which is the same or similar to the SA360 reports is the paid search report. We expect the other reports will become accurate once we launch the solution for display. So frequently asked questions, why do SA360 and Campaign Manager conversion reports not match? And the answer is SA360 uses conversion modeling, Campaign Manager does not, or SA360 is tracking accurately because you've implemented one of the solutions and Campaign Manager doesn't have that yet. When I implement the global site tag, what will happen to the SA360 modeling? So the modeling will be disabled automatically as soon as the global site tag is implemented. So as soon as you start receiving conversions. What happens if I have both the event snippet and the old iframe tag implemented? Remember, the event snippet is just a reformatted version of the iframe tag. So you'll be at risk. You're essentially putting the same tag on the website twice. So you will be double counting. So you should avoid this. And will this solution affect post-impression conversion tracking? No. So this is only post-click conversion attribution and only currently on search. In the future, it will be for display as well, but only post-click, not post-impression. Can the global site tag be implemented via a third-party tag management solution? Yes, but you'll need to check with the third-party tag management solution provider. We can't really guide you on that. Most of them that I've spoken to have already implemented a template because the global site tag has been out for a year now. So they've come up with the versions of the solution. Will I keep my previously tracked conversions after implementing the global site tag? So yes, all of your previous historical data for the tag will continue to be there, and any new conversions will continue to flow into that same floodlight activity ID and any custom columns you've created in SA360 on that tag. And then the final question, what happens if I do not implement a site-wide tagging solution? So an update is expected to be made in Safari imminently, and that will require that you have a site-wide tagging solution to be in place in order to maintain full conversion measurement. If you don't implement it, you will be at risk of losing a portion of your conversions. And that concludes the site-wide tagging section. I'm going to pass you over to Sebastian now. He's going to take you through parallel tracking.
Thank you, Frank.
Now with
lightweight with parallel tracking, and what I will do is first talk about parallel tracking and mention what it is, where it's coming from, what the benefits are, before talking about the steps that are necessary in order to become compatible. So let's start with the product overview. So basically what parallel tracking is. As of now, when a user clicks on an ad, usually when there's a third-party tool such as Search Ads 360 in place, there's a redirect happening. So Search Ads 360 appends or gathers information about a click by redirecting the user through a click server before the user actually reaches the final URL or the actual landing page they are interested in. And if those steps happen one after the other, it increases how much time is needed between the click and actually reaching the website that is desired. And therefore, AdWords, or Google Ads as it's called now, is introducing parallel tracking. And what has happened going forward is that the tracking template, so the third-party redirect, will fire simultaneously. So the user, after clicking on the ad, will be directed directly to the final URL, and the tracking template or the third-party redirect will fire in the background. And if we're doing the right changes, we should still be able to gather all kinds of information about our campaigns. So basically, which keyword generated the click, etc. And who's doing this change? It's a change that's, for now anyways, unique to Google Ads. And it's happening on the 30th of October. So until the 30th of October, we should make sure that all our engine accounts, all the Google Ads accounts are migrated and are compatible with parallel tracking. So I've already mentioned page load time and the benefit of parallel tracking for page load time. There's another benefit that comes with parallel tracking. And that benefit has to do with accelerated mobile pages. It's basically a project, Accelerated Mobile Pages, or AMP, is basically a project that aims to make the mobile web much faster, so increasing user experience. And one technology it uses is the AMP cache. And this cache, where there's a cached version of every AMP or accelerated mobile page, is only available or only reachable if a user is not redirected when they are directed to a website. So if we would be working with redirects, there would be no chance of accessing that cache. If we're using parallel tracking, the cache can be leveraged, and it again improves page load time. So essentially, that's where parallel tracking is coming from and the benefits of it, and basically what the changes. Now we're going to talk about the enablement of parallel tracking, so the steps necessary in order to become compatible. The steps are essentially 4 different steps. And the first one is just using the migration tool. Then we check compatibility in the UI. So right in your Search Ads 360 accounts, before making potential manual changes if they are needed. And then as a 4th and final step, we enable parallel tracking. Now I will go through every step individually, but before I will mention all the kind of tracking features that are currently not compatible with parallel tracking. So here we can basically differentiate between 2 buckets of features. One is the bucket of features for which we need the migration tool, and the other one too is the bucket of features for which we need to make manual adjustments. So the migration tool is needed, for example, or if we're using Search Ads 360 macros, if we have the conversion API activated, if we have Google Analytics integrated with Search Ads 360, or if we're using cross-channel remarketing such as search to social or social to search. Manual work is needed if we're using active landing page tests, or if we're currently running landing page tests, if we're using URL parameters in Search Ads 360, if we're using natural search, campaign manager macros, or tracking templates. First, now I will talk about the migration tool and how it works, basically showing screenshots before going through the manual steps needed in order to become compatible with parallel tracking. I will probably spend the most time in talking about the use of tracking templates, as I think that's the most complicated one. And yeah, let me quickly show you what the migration tool looks like and what it essentially does. So you can find the migration tool in the Search Ads 360 UI when you navigate to the Engine Accounts tab. And here in the overview page, it is available, or it will be available in the near future to all Google Ads accounts. It might already be available in some of your accounts. If not, no need to freak out. It will appear in the coming weeks. And essentially, there's two tick boxes that we can activate. One is for Search Ads 360 macros, and the other one is for the Conversion API, Google Analytics, or cross-channel remarketing. So in order to migrate those features, we just tick the two boxes and hit save. Also, what's available as of now are further columns in the engine account overview that allow us to surface certain information in bulk for every engine account that is subject to parallel tracking, so every Google Ads account. And we can keep a good overview of for which accounts we already activated parallel tracking, for which account the accounts the migration has already started, is finished, or hasn't started yet. So what's happening with the first tick box, Search Ads 360 macro migration? What it essentially does is that it changes the macros in the tracking template to custom parameters, and then adds the custom parameters at the location where it's necessary. So for example, if we're using a custom parameter in order to get information around campaign names, then this custom parameter will be hosted at campaign level. If it's about keyword level information, such as the keyword text, it will be at keyword level. And all this should happen automatically. Nevertheless, after the migration is done, it's always useful to make a few sense checks and just take a few samples and look into a few example keywords, for example, to see if they're all migrated properly. And then the next change, the next tick box, which is relevant to clients or advertisers using the Conversion API, Google Analytics, or cross-channel remarketing, what it will essentially do is it will add a parameter to the final URL suffix, and it will activate auto tagging in Google Ads. So let me quickly first talk about auto tagging. Auto tagging, what it essentially does in combination with parallel tracking, is append the Google Click ID to the final URL suffix, as well as the tracking template. It's not necessarily visible in the URL suffix, but it will be appended to the final URL. And therefore, it will be sent to the website and also to the click server. We're seeing here as the redirect in the tracking template, which is http clicksurf.dartsearch.net. And the Google Click ID is necessary, for example, for Google Analytics and also the Conversion API in order to link certain campaign names, keyword names, etc. in Google Analytics with that specific click. And that's all we essentially need in order to do that. For cross-channel remarketing, we see this parameter down here in the final URL suffix. And this is, again, a custom parameter that will essentially be filled with an ID at the point of the click when it's relevant, when it makes sense. URL suffix, just as a quick side note, is a new field. URL suffix is a field that has been added for parallel tracking. And what it essentially does, as opposed to tracking templates, is appending information to the final URL. So we have the tracking template in this screenshot, where we're seeing the redirect as clicksurf.dartsearch.net and some custom parameters added to it. And then we're seeing the final URL suffix. So what's in the tracking template will fire parallel. So this won't reach the actual website. And what we're seeing in the final URL suffix will be added to the final URL and will essentially be reaching the website. And if we're taking the example of cross-channel remarketing, this is what happens. So for example, we want to build a social to search remarketing list. Somebody clicks on a social ad, then this parameter is filled by a certain ID. And later on, we can use this ID when we're creating remarketing lists in order to differentiate between URL contains and then that specific ID So it's being picked up on the website and therefore needs to go to the final URL suffix. And that's all about the migration tool already. After the migration is completed, or the use of the migration tool is completed, we should go to the UI and check for compatibility manually. And this is essentially a screenshot of what it looks like. I'll quickly show you in one of the demo accounts anyways. And usually when you start, you would be in the campaign tab. So you just navigate to the engine accounts tab, select, for example, this Google Ads account, click edit details. Now this looks a bit different from the screenshot because here in this demo account, the migration tool is not activated yet, but we still have the compatibility checker. And the compatibility checker will be available in all accounts. And what we can do simply is click view compatibility issues. And here we get an overview of all the issues that we're currently facing that we need to work on. So after the migration tool has been used, it's helpful, and the migration has been completed, it's helpful to do this again, because then we know for ourselves if the migration was successful, or we have one way of telling. And also we know what's left, the kind of manual changes that we still need to do. So here we're seeing URLs or URL templates contain Search Ads 360 macros. If we've done the migration, this shouldn't appear anymore. One or more landing page tests is currently active. We'll talk about that in a minute. Google Analytics integration is enabled. That should be covered by now. Conversion API should be covered also through the migration tool, and so should cross-channel remarketing. Search Ads 360 URL parameters, they need manual changes. We'll talk about that later. And the same is true for URL tracking templates, which also will require manual changes. So once we've used the migration tool and we checked in the compatibility checker whether or not it worked properly, and if there's just manual changes left to do, then we move on to those manual changes and go about them. And yeah, we formally talked that there's 5 of them. So we're going to start looking into the first one, and this one is fairly straightforward. So if there's landing page tests that are currently running, I would recommend to just finish them as soon as possible, evaluate them, and then focus on the migration, because active or landing page tests as such are not compatible with parallel tracking. So they need to be disabled before the migration. If you're planning to do landing page tests in the near future, I would recommend to maybe wait until Q4. There will be a tool launched then, which is called Ad Variation, that will be able to do landing page tests. Okay, the next one is Campaign Manager macros, or formerly DCM macros. Campaign Manager macros are not compatible with parallel tracking, and what's not happening anymore is that clicks are actually redirected through the click server, so those Campaign Manager macros can't be filled with actual values on the click server, and therefore it's no longer compatible, and Campaign Manager macros need to be removed. About Search Ads 360 URL parameters and regarding column. URL parameters have actually been deprecated in March, so there should be very few instances of this being active in any engine accounts. If you find any of those, or if they are flagged and they still serve a purpose, they're not just outdated leftovers from ancient times, then either add them to the final URL or to the URL suffix, so to make sure that they be sent to the actual URL. If you're using natural search, then it's important, because natural search relies on exclusion parameters, to move those exclusion parameters to the final URL before actually enabling parallel tracking. If that's not done, what will happen is essentially that paid search conversions will be attributed as organic, and yeah, this would draw a false picture. So move them to the final URL before enabling parallel tracking. The use of tracking templates. This is actually the most complicated kind of manual task that can happen. And it's complicated because it depends a lot on what parameters of a tracking template and different items of a tracking template actually being used for. So what's their purpose? And here it's very helpful to become a clear image of what is actually the purpose of the different items or entities of our tracking templates. The first necessary action is to make sure all URL templates start with HTTPS. So if they are using HTTP right now, and this is a tracking provider other than GMP or Search Ads 360, I would advise to reach out to that provider and ask them about what would happen if you change from HTTP to HTTPS. If you're using Search Ads 360, you don't have to worry about this step because it should happen automatically in the near future. And then the next one is making sure that the correct URL fields are listed or are added in the right field for it. And I will explain this using this table. So on the left-hand side, we're seeing the different fields where we can add information about the URL or the tracking template. And on the top or in the headers, we see different parts of or different entities of the actual tracking templates. So on the left-hand side, we're seeing URL templates. URL templates are nothing new. The only change here is that they will fire simultaneously to the ad click. There won't be a redirection happening after the 30th of October for all Google Ads accounts. And next is final URL suffix. This is a completely new field. And this has been built basically to add parameters that should be appended to the final URL. As, for example, they could be relevant for remarketing purposes. And then there's the final URL. This is also nothing new. This is what you usually set up in your ads, maybe on keyword level or site link level. And then on top, we're seeing in the first column, the third-party redirects. So this is, for example, what we've seen before on a screenshot, the redirect that Search Ads 360 is using. And redirects, it's been like that for quite a while. Have to be present in the URL template, otherwise your ads would get disapproved in Google Ads anyways. So third-party redirects have to go to the URL template. That one is fairly straightforward, but then the next ones might be a bit complicated of identifying what they actually are. So we can, for example, have parameters that are actually being used for page content. And this is often true for very dynamic websites, for example, in e-commerce. And what can be a parameter that is used for page content is, for example, if I go onto my favorite e-commerce site and I search for sneakers. And this search might be afterwards be present in the actual URL as a parameter that would look very similar or could look very similar to a parameter used for website reporting or website tracking or third-party tracking and reporting. But it's used to render specific page content. Another example could be, again, a very dynamic e-commerce site where I use on-site filters, and then those filters are being added as parameters to the URL. And since those parameters are needed to render specific content of the website, so specific pre-search content or pre-filtered content, it should usually be added to the final URL because this is what you actually want to show the user. And I think in most cases, this would be the natural thing to do. However, if they are currently present in the tracking template, they should be moved either to the final URL or to the final URL suffix. So parameters used for site tracking or site reporting. Those are usually all the parameters that are necessary for website analytics tools, for example. So, for example, this could be Google Analytics or Adobe Omniture. Google Analytics typically uses UTM parameters for this. But if we're using the Google Analytics integration, we don't really need them because the Google Click ID that is appended through auto tagging will surface all those information that we could otherwise add via parameters. Will add all this kind of information to Google Analytics. However, if we're using another website analytics tool such as Adobe Omniture, we might depend on parameters in order to identify within Adobe Omniture which campaign has, I don't know, the highest bounce rate, for example. And this can happen on different levels of granularity. The most granular would be keywords, site links, etc. And a less granular would be on account level or campaign level. It really depends on the needs of, on the reporting needs. But basically what's happening with those website analytics tools, they pick up those parameters once a user reaches the website. So there will be a pixel on the website, either for Google Analytics or for Omniture, that will pick up those parameters and that kind of information, not about the click, but about the visit of the to the website or the session. And therefore, they need to be sent to the website. Hence, if they're currently present in the URL template, in order to keep sending them to the website so they become readable by, for example, Adobe Omniture, they should be added or need to be added to the final URL suffix or optionally to the final URL. And then we have parameters that are used for third-party tracking and third-party reporting. So typically, if we think, for example, about Search Ads 360, those are parameters that we append to our tracking templates in order to send more information to that Search Ads 360 or GMP click server. And since usually they are being picked up by the click server, they need to be part of what's being redirected to the click server, so what's firing parallel. So they should be part of the URL template. So yeah, that they can, so that we have that information available also in Search Ads 360. I'll run through a quick and very basic example for this. And what we're seeing here is just an example URL template, how it could look currently, for example, on account level or campaign level. And the redirect here, the third-party redirect, is tracker.com. And then we have a parameter that allows us to add a placeholder that will essentially be filled by the URL, so by the landing page that is present, for example, in the specific ad. Then we have a first parameter here. And since it's highlighted in green, we know in this example that's a third-party redirect. So this one needs to be staying or needs to stay in the tracking template because it's relevant to the third-party provider, to tracker.com. In blue, we have an additional parameter. And this one highlighted in blue, it looks very similar to the parameter used by tracker.com, so by the example tracking provider, but we're having it rendered in a different color. So in this example, we're using it for on-site or for site tracking or site reporting, and therefore it should be moved to the final URL suffix. And this example leaves it clear that sometimes it's very hard to tell the difference between a parameter that's used by a tracking provider, a third-party tracking provider, or a parameter that is used for site tracking or site reporting. It's best if there's some kind of documentation about what parameter is used for what, so that we can identify the purpose of each parameter and then add it to the relevant field at the relevant granularity. One thing I just want to add to in order to talk more about the final URL suffix is that final URL suffix as a field is available on every level where we have URL templates present. So it can be appended as granular as site link or keyword. So, and then if we're done with all those kind of steps, so if we've made sure that we've used the migration tool, and by the way, if you're not using features for which the migration tool is necessary, we would still advise to use the migration tool just to make sure that all accounts are set up properly for the future as well. So basically, first step, using the migration tool, that's covered. Then checking compatibility, that's also covered. Then we made all the manual changes that were still necessary. We got that covered. And then what I would do is just to do one more compatibility check in the UI, because it's just a few clicks. It's literally no workload before enabling parallel tracking. And how do we enable parallel tracking? So basically, we can do it by, if I go back to the demo account, we're again navigating to the engine accounts. We're selecting this one, added details. And here from the interface, we can just enable parallel tracking. Here, which is really good and helpful, it's flagging all the issues it's seeing. And then I have to confirm, yes, I understand, before activating it. So it would highlight once more the issues or the features that are currently not compatible with parallel tracking before it allows actually to migrate. And once we've done that, we hit save, it's cancel, and we're done with it. There's also a way to do this via bulk features. So for example, if we're having, I don't know, multiple AdWords accounts or multiple Google Ads accounts here that we all want to migrate to parallel tracking, we can do so by using bulk operations. And I've mentioned before that we have new columns available, for example, for parallel tracking. So if we know, for example, that there's multiple engine accounts that we need to migrate, and we want to keep track of which one has been activated or migrated and then activated, and which engine account hasn't, this column will help us to keep a good overview. So yes, that's basically it about parallel tracking and for today's live stream. I don't know, Francis, do you have anything to add at this point?
No, I don't think so.
I guess not.
No, I don't know if you can hear me.
Sorry, Francis, I didn't hear. Did you have anything to add?
No.
Okay, perfect. Well, I hope this was helpful. And yeah, there's more documentation around those topics in the help centers. And if not, you can reach out to us, basically to your counterparts in GMP in order to get more guidance around those topics. Hope you'll have a nice day ahead, and thank you for joining.